I'm Sarah Mitchell, 32 years old, and 4 years ago, my husband's business school friends whispered behind champagne glasses that I was nothing more than a gold digger who trapped their brilliant friend David into marriage. They saw a girl from Medford with a state school degree and decided I wasn't worthy of their exclusive circle. Last month, I walked into the boardroom at Whitmore Business School, the very institution they worship, and signed the papers to purchase it for $180 million. The transformation from dismissed wife to university owner wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about discovering who I really was when stripped of everyone else's expectations and limitations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Medford, Massachusetts meant understanding that hard work was the only currency that mattered in our household. Our two-bedroom apartment sat above Mrs. Chen's corner market, where the aroma of fresh bread mixed with the distant hum of traffic heading into Boston. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my father Robert's alarm clock buzzing at 5 every morning as he prepared for another day installing electrical systems in the gleaming office buildings where people like David's friends would eventually work. My mother Linda taught fourth grade at the local elementary school, arriving home each evening with arms full of papers to grade and stories about kids who reminded her of me at that age. Curious, determined, always asking questions that went beyond the standard curriculum. She'd spread her work across our small kitchen table, red pen in hand, while I did my homework beside her. Those evenings taught me that excellence wasn't about having the best resources, but about maximizing whatever you had available. Money was always tight, but never desperate. Dad belonged to the electricians' union, which meant steady work and decent benefits, though it also meant we measured purchases in terms of necessity rather than desire. When my laptop died during senior year of high school, replacing it required 3 months of careful budgeting, and my promise to work extra shifts at the local grocery store, where I'd been bagging groceries since turning 16. The apartment itself reflected our practical approach to life. Furniture that prioritized function over form, a television that Dad had repaired twice rather than replace, and walls covered with my academic achievements rather than expensive art. My parents celebrated every honor roll certificate, every academic award, every small victory as if I'd won an Olympic medal. Their pride was genuine and infectious, creating a foundation of confidence that would prove crucial in the years ahead. Boston's class divisions were impossible to ignore, even from our modest perch in Medford. The city's geography told the story of who belonged where. Beacon Hill, with its federal-style townhouses and gas-lit streets, represented old money and established power. The North End buzzed with Italian heritage and working-class pride. Cambridge housed the intellectual elite around Harvard and MIT. We lived in the spaces between, close enough to see these worlds but rarely invited to enter them. My parents never expressed bitterness about these divisions, but they were keenly aware of them. Dad would point out buildings where he'd done electrical work, describing the marble lobbies and mahogany conference rooms with the appreciation of a craftsman who understood quality even if he couldn't afford it. Mom would mention former students who'd received scholarships to prestigious private schools, following their progress with maternal pride mixed with quiet longing for opportunities she'd never been able to provide. School became my pathway to something different, though I wasn't entirely sure what that something would be. UMass Boston offered solid academics at a price my family could manage with financial aid and my part-time job income. I chose marketing partly because it seemed practical and partly because I was fascinated by how companies convinced people to want things they didn't know they needed. The psychology of persuasion, the art of storytelling, the metrics that revealed human behavior patterns, all of it felt like solving puzzles with real-world consequences. College introduced me to people from backgrounds I'd only seen in movies. Classmates who discussed spring break trips to Europe as casually as I talked about picking up extra shifts at work. Students who changed majors multiple times because they were exploring their passions rather than calculating return on investment for their education. The contrast was stark but not necessarily enviable. I learned that privilege could create as many problems as it solved, just different kinds of problems than the ones I knew. My professors at UMass Boston were a mix of academics and industry professionals who brought real-world perspective to theoretical concepts. Dr. Martinez, who taught consumer behavior, had spent 15 years at major advertising agencies before transitioning to academia. She was the first person who suggested I had natural instincts for understanding market dynamics that couldn't be taught from textbooks. Under her guidance, I developed campaign strategies for local businesses as part of my coursework, discovering that I could translate complex data into simple, actionable insights that drove results. The work-study program connected me with a small marketing agency in Somerville that specialized in helping local businesses establish online presence. It wasn't glamorous work, mostly updating social media accounts and writing blog posts about plumbing services and restaurant specials, but it taught me the fundamentals of digital marketing from the ground up. I learned to optimize websites for search engines, create engaging content on limited budgets, and measure success through metrics that directly impacted small business owners' livelihoods. Emma Davis became my closest friend during sophomore year, when we were paired for a group project analyzing consumer response to sustainable packaging. She was studying graphic design, with dreams of starting her own creative agency, and her artistic perspective perfectly complemented my analytical approach. Where I saw data patterns and market opportunities, she saw color schemes and visual narratives that could bring those insights to life. Our friendship was built on mutual respect for each other's talents and shared understanding of working-class backgrounds that made us both hungry for success. Emma's family owned a small printing business in Somerville that had been struggling to compete with online services. Her father Louis had built the business from nothing, serving local restaurants and small shops with flyers, menus, and business cards. Watching him adapt to digital competition while maintaining relationships with longtime customers taught me valuable lessons about business resilience and customer loyalty that no textbook could provide. The contrast between Emma's creative chaos and my organized approach created a dynamic that pushed both of us to think differently. She'd sketch logo concepts while I calculated conversion rates. I'd analyze competitor pricing while she developed brand personality frameworks. Our study sessions often turned into brainstorming sessions where we'd solve imaginary business challenges for practice, unknowingly preparing for real-world situations we'd encounter later. Dating in college was sporadic.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
And generally disappointing. Most guys my age seemed intimidated by my focus on academics and career preparation, interpreting my ambition as disinterest in fun or relationships. I dated a few fellow students, but the relationships felt superficial and temporary. Nobody seemed to understand that working toward future goals didn't mean I couldn't enjoy the present, just that I needed both components to feel fulfilled. My parents visited campus occasionally, usually for special events or when Dad had work nearby. Watching them navigate the university environment always moved me. They were clearly proud but also slightly out of place, asking careful questions about my classes and professors while trying not to reveal their own educational insecurities. Mom would study the course catalog with the same intensity she brought to lesson planning, wanting to understand every aspect of my experience, even if the academic jargon was unfamiliar. Those visits reinforced my determination to succeed, not just for personal satisfaction, but to validate their sacrifices. Dad had worked overtime for years to help pay for college expenses that financial aid didn't cover. Mom had spent evenings tutoring other people's children to earn extra money for my textbooks and supplies. Their investment in my education was both financial and emotional, creating a responsibility I carried seriously but not as a burden. Senior year brought the pressure of job searching and career planning. The Career Services Office at UMass Boston was helpful but realistic about the competition graduates would face. Boston's marketing industry was competitive, with graduates from more prestigious schools often having advantages in networking and name recognition. I'd need to distinguish myself through demonstrated skills and results, rather than educational pedigree. The internship I'd maintained throughout college led to a full-time offer from the Somerville agency after graduation. The salary was modest but fair, and the experience would be invaluable. My role would involve managing digital marketing campaigns for small and medium businesses throughout the Boston area, with opportunities to develop new service offerings as the agency grew. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a solid foundation for building the experience and network I'd need for future opportunities. Graduation day was one of the proudest moments of our family's history. Dad took the day off work, something he rarely did for anything other than emergencies. Mom bought a new dress and spent an hour figuring out how to work her camera phone to capture every moment. Seeing them in the audience, beaming with pride as I walked across the stage, crystallized everything their sacrifices had made possible. I wasn't just receiving a diploma, I was opening doors that had been closed to previous generations of our family. The celebration dinner at a modest Italian restaurant in the North End felt more meaningful than any fancy reception could have been. Dad raised his glass of wine, something he only drank on special occasions, and toasted to new beginnings and endless possibilities. Mom cried happy tears while taking pictures of everything from the menu to the bread basket, wanting to preserve every detail of a day she'd been anticipating for 4 years. Walking into my first real job, the following Monday, I carried with me not just a marketing degree, but a deep understanding of what it meant to earn opportunities through persistence and hard work. I understood the value of money because I'd watched my parents stretch every dollar. I appreciated education because I'd seen how lack of access to it could limit options. Most importantly, I knew that success would require not just individual effort, but the ability to lift others along the way, just as my parents had lifted me. The small agency in Somerville buzzed with creative energy and entrepreneurial spirit. My boss, Janet Walsh, had started the company 5 years earlier after leaving a corporate marketing position to focus on helping local businesses compete in an increasingly digital marketplace. She believed that small businesses were the backbone of the economy, but often lacked the resources to implement sophisticated marketing strategies that larger competitors took for granted. My desk was positioned near the window overlooking Highland Avenue, where I could watch the morning rush of commuters heading into Boston while I planned social media campaigns for auto repair shops and family restaurants. The work was diverse and engaging, requiring me to quickly understand different industries and customer bases. One day I'd be writing blog posts about seasonal tire maintenance, the next I'd be developing Instagram strategies for a boutique bakery. The agency's client roster included exactly the kinds of businesses my father had always supported and my mother had taught me to value. Family-owned restaurants, where recipes had been passed down through generations. Independent bookstores that hosted community events and knew their customers by name. Service businesses built on reputation and word-of-mouth referrals, rather than massive advertising budgets. These weren't just clients, they were the fabric of the communities where I'd been raised. Working directly with business owners taught me lessons about entrepreneurship that no classroom could provide. I learned that successful small business owners possessed an intuitive understanding of their customers that larger corporations spent millions trying to replicate through market research. They knew which promotional strategies would resonate because they lived in the same neighborhoods as their customers, shared the same concerns, and understood the local culture in ways that outsiders never could. The challenge was translating that intimate customer knowledge into digital marketing strategies that could compete with larger competitors' resources. Search engine optimization for a family pizza shop required different approaches than marketing a chain restaurant. Social media strategies for independent retailers needed to emphasize personal relationships and community connections, rather than just product features and pricing. After 6 months on the job, I'd developed a reputation within the agency for understanding how to make small budgets deliver big results. My campaigns consistently outperformed expectations because I focused on authentic storytelling, rather than trying to mimic what larger companies were doing. A hardware store's social media presence became a valuable resource for home improvement tips and seasonal maintenance advice. A family restaurant's online reviews improved dramatically after we implemented a customer feedback system that addressed concerns quickly and publicly. Janet began assigning me the agency's most challenging accounts, businesses that had struggled with previous marketing efforts or were facing increased competition from national chains. These projects required creative problem-solving and deep analysis of market conditions, customer behavior, and competitive positioning. I thrived on the complexity and the direct impact my work had on families and communities I cared about. The success of my campaigns led to recognition within Boston's small business community and invitations to speak at local Chamber of Commerce events and networking meetings. Standing in front of rooms full of business owners, explaining how digital marketing could level the playing field against larger competitors, I felt a sense of purpose that went beyond just doing my job well. I was helping preserve the independence and character that made Boston's neighborhoods unique. One evening in late spring, Emma invited me to a party hosted by one of her graphic design classmates who'd landed a job at a prestigious firm downtown. The gathering was in a renovated warehouse space in the South End, filled with young professionals from various creative industries. The crowd was more sophisticated than parties I was used to attending, with conversations revolving around art gallery openings, weekend trips to New York, and career moves within established companies. I was standing near the bar, listening to Emma discuss a freelance project with a photographer, when someone tapped my shoulder and asked if I was enjoying the party. Turning around, I found myself looking into the warm brown eyes of David Mitchell, who would change the trajectory of my life in ways I couldn't have imagined that evening. David Mitchell possessed the kind of effortless confidence that came from never questioning whether he belonged in any room he entered. His handshake was firm without being aggressive, his smile genuine rather than practiced, and his questions about my work showed actual interest rather than polite conversation filling. When I mentioned working with small businesses in digital marketing, his eyes lit up with curiosity instead of the glazed look most people got when discussing anything involving spreadsheets and analytics. He worked at Sterling and Associates, a management consulting firm that helped mid-sized companies navigate growth challenges and operational improvements. Unlike many consultants who seem to speak exclusively in corporate jargon, David translated complex business concepts into conversational language that made sense to someone outside his industry. He graduated from Whitmore Business School 2 years earlier and was already being considered for accelerated partnership track, a distinction that typically took 5 or 6 years to achieve. What struck me most during our initial conversation was his genuine respect for entrepreneurship at any scale. When I described helping a family bakery increase online orders by 300% through targeted social media campaigns, he asked detailed questions about customer acquisition costs and retention strategies that revealed sophisticated understanding of business fundamentals. He didn't dismiss small business marketing as beneath his consulting expertise, but recognized it as a different application of the same principles he used with larger clients. The party swirled around us as we discovered shared interests in behavioral economics, the psychology of decision-making, and the challenge of translating data insights into actionable strategies. David had read many of the same books that had influenced my approach to marketing, from Daniel Kahneman's work on cognitive biases to Malcolm Gladwell's exploration of market tipping points. Our conversation flowed naturally from professional interests to personal values, revealing alignment on topics like the importance of work-life balance and commitment to making positive impact through our careers. Emma appeared periodically to check on me, raising her eyebrows with approval when she noticed how engaged I was in conversation with this articulate stranger. She'd been encouraging me to date more seriously, arguing that my focus on career building shouldn't preclude finding someone who could be both romantic partner and intellectual equal. David seemed to embody exactly the kind of person she'd been describing, someone whose ambition matched my own but who also possessed emotional intelligence and genuine warmth. As the evening wound down, David asked if I'd be interested in continuing our conversation over dinner sometime soon. His invitation was straightforward without being presumptuous, confident without being arrogant. I found myself saying yes before fully considering the implications, drawn by his combination of professional success and personal authenticity that felt increasingly rare in Boston's competitive dating scene. Our first official date took place at a cozy bistro in Harvard Square, chosen because it offered excellent food and an atmosphere that encouraged conversation rather than impressing anyone with expensive ambiance. David arrived precisely on time, having researched the restaurant's menu online to ensure they accommodated my dietary preferences that I'd mentioned during our initial conversation. Such thoughtfulness suggested someone who paid attention to details that mattered to other people, a quality that immediately distinguished him from previous dating experiences. The conversation that evening revealed layers of David's background that hadn't emerged at the party. He'd grown up in Newton, attending private schools that prepared him for Ivy League consideration, though he'd ultimately chosen Whitmore Business School for its reputation in entrepreneurship and innovation, rather than purely for prestige. His parents, Richard and Patricia Mitchell, had built comfortable wealth through his father's surgical practice and his mother's involvement in various charitable organizations and social committees. Despite his privileged background, David displayed awareness of the advantages he'd received and genuine interest in understanding different perspectives. When I described my parents' sacrifices to support my education, he listened without trying to relate through false equivalencies or dismissive comparisons. He asked thoughtful questions about working-class experiences that revealed curiosity rather than condescension, suggesting someone who recognized that different backgrounds provided different kinds of valuable knowledge. Our conversation touched on his business school experience at Whitmore, which he described with mixture of appreciation and mild frustration. The academic quality was exceptional, providing frameworks for strategic thinking and network access that would benefit his entire career. However, he'd been surprised by the social dynamics among students, particularly the way some classmates seemed more interested in leveraging relationships for personal advancement than in collaborative learning or mutual support. David mentioned several close friends from business school who'd remained important parts of his social circle, describing them with affection despite acknowledging their occasionally competitive tendencies. Brandon Wells worked in investment banking and possessed sharp analytical skills, alongside equally sharp wit that sometimes crossed into sarcasm. Jessica Chen had joined McKinsey after graduation and brought impressive work ethic to everything she tackled, though she could be ruthlessly judgmental about people she perceived as lacking ambition or sophistication. Marcus Rodriguez had started working for a venture capital firm immediately after graduation and displayed natural talent for identifying promising investment opportunities, though his success had perhaps inflated his ego beyond what his actual experience warranted. Ashley Hamilton had become a corporate lawyer at one of Boston's most prestigious firms, combining legal expertise with social connections that made her valuable for business development as well as client service. Though she sometimes wielded those connections like weapons against people she considered beneath her status. As David described his friends, I noticed subtle warning signs that I filed away for future consideration. The way he laughed when mentioning Brandon's brutal honesty suggested tolerance for behavior that might cross appropriate boundaries. His description of Jessica's high standards sounded like euphemism for judgmental attitudes that could become problematic. The admiration in his voice, when discussing Marcus's rapid career advancement, hinted at values that prioritized financial success over other measures of worth. His characterization of Ashley's discerning taste seemed to celebrate exclusivity rather than inclusivity. Despite these concerns, David himself displayed none of the negative qualities he seemed to excuse in his friends. His questions about my work showed genuine respect for my expertise and accomplishments. He insisted on splitting the dinner bill, explaining that he believed financial equality in relationships was important for maintaining mutual respect and independence. When discussing future career goals, he expressed interest in eventually starting his own consulting practice, focused on helping smaller companies that couldn't afford services from major firms like Sterling and Associates. The evening ended with a walk along the Charles River, where we continued talking about books, travel dreams, and philosophical questions about success and fulfillment. David's perspectives were thoughtful and well considered, revealing someone who'd given serious consideration to what kind of life he wanted to build beyond just professional achievement. He spoke about wanting to find work that felt meaningful, rather than just lucrative, about the importance of maintaining close relationships with family and friends, and about his hope to eventually find a partner who could be a true collaborator in building something significant together. When he walked me to my car, David's goodnight kiss was gentle and respectful, conveying interest while respecting boundaries. He asked when he could see me again, with enthusiasm that felt genuine rather than obligatory, and we made plans for the following weekend, before I drove home to Medford. The entire evening had exceeded my expectations, in ways that made me optimistic about the possibility of building something real with someone who seemed to share my values and appreciate my ambitions. Over the following months, David and I developed a relationship that balanced romance with respect for each other's professional commitments and personal independence. He never made me feel guilty about working late on important campaigns or spending evenings analyzing client data to optimize their marketing performance. Instead, he'd often bring coffee to my apartment and work on his own projects while I finished whatever needed completion, creating companionship without pressure or distraction. David's support for my career was both emotional and practical. When I mentioned wanting to expand my expertise in search engine optimization, he connected me with a former classmate who'd built a successful digital marketing agency and was willing to share insights about advanced techniques. When I struggled with a particularly challenging client who couldn't understand why their website wasn't generating leads, despite minimal investment in content or user experience improvements, David helped me develop presentation materials that explained complex concepts in terms the client could understand and act upon. Our social lives began blending naturally as we introduced each other to our respective friend groups and professional networks. Emma immediately approved of David, appreciating his genuine interest in her graphic design work and his willingness to provide business perspective on her freelance client challenges. My parents welcomed him warmly during family dinners, though I noticed Mom's slight nervousness about cooking for someone from a wealthier background, and Dad's careful attention to David's responses to questions about work and family. David's friends proved more complicated to navigate. The first time he invited me to join their regular happy hour gathering at an upscale bar near downtown Boston, I immediately felt the subtle dynamics he'd mentioned during our early conversations. Brandon Wells greeted me with polite enthusiasm that felt slightly performative, asking questions about my work that seemed designed to establish my position in some invisible hierarchy, rather than to genuinely understand what I did for a living. Jessica Chen was initially more welcoming, perhaps recognizing a fellow ambitious woman trying to establish herself professionally. However, her interest shifted noticeably when she learned I'd attended UMass Boston, rather than a more prestigious institution. The change wasn't dramatic enough to be called rude, but questions that had been personal and engaging became perfunctory and brief, as if she'd mentally categorized me as someone not worth investing significant attention or energy. Marcus Rodriguez displayed the kind of casual arrogance that money and early career success can generate in people who haven't yet experienced significant setbacks or challenges. His questions about my marketing work focused primarily on revenue generation and scalability, dismissing the community impact and small business success stories that I found most fulfilling about my career. When I mentioned helping a family restaurant recover from pandemic-related losses through improved online ordering systems, he responded with suggestions about how they should consider franchising or selling to larger restaurant groups instead of maintaining independence. Ashley Hamilton was perhaps
The most subtly dismissive of the group, employing techniques that allowed her to express disapproval while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions. She'd ask about my background with seemingly innocent curiosity, then respond to my answers with faint surprise that suggested my experiences were somehow unexpected or amusing. When I mentioned growing up in Medford, she replied with, "Oh, how interesting. I've never actually been there," in a tone that implied she'd never needed to visit such places and couldn't imagine why anyone would choose to live there. Despite these uncomfortable dynamics, David seemed oblivious to the subtle ways his friends were evaluating and dismissing me. He was genuinely excited to share his relationship with people who'd been important parts of his life since business school, and he interpreted their polite surface behavior as acceptance and approval. When I mentioned feeling slightly out of place during these gatherings, he assured me that everyone liked me and encouraged me to give the relationships time to develop naturally. The disconnect between David's perception and my experience created the first real tension in our relationship. I didn't want to force him to choose between his girlfriend and his longtime friends, but I also couldn't pretend that their subtle condescension wasn't affecting my comfort and confidence during social gatherings. The situation was complicated by the fact that their behavior was rarely overtly rude or inappropriate, making it difficult to address directly without seeming overly sensitive or paranoid. As our relationship deepened toward serious commitment, these social dynamics became increasingly important to navigate successfully. David was clearly someone who valued loyalty and maintained long-term friendships, qualities that I respected and wanted to support. However, I also needed to establish my own position within his social circle in ways that preserved my dignity and self-respect while avoiding unnecessary conflict or drama. The business school influence on David's friend group was evident in their approach to most social interactions as networking opportunities and their tendency to evaluate people based on professional credentials and potential usefulness for career advancement. They discussed mutual acquaintances in terms of their company affiliations and recent promotions, shared job market intelligence about which firms were hiring or restructuring, and analyzed business news through the lens of how developments might affect their own career trajectories. This professional focus wasn't inherently problematic, but it created an environment where personal worth seemed directly tied to career achievements and educational pedigree. Conversations rarely ventured into topics like hobbies, family relationships, or social causes that didn't relate to business networking. The group's idea of fun typically involved activities that reinforced their professional status, such as exclusive restaurant reservations, invitation-only events, or expensive entertainment that served as much to demonstrate success as to provide enjoyment. David fit comfortably within this dynamic while also maintaining interests and values that extended beyond pure career focus. He enjoyed hiking and photography, volunteered with a literacy program for adult learners, and maintained close relationships with family members who weren't particularly impressed by his professional achievements. These qualities helped him avoid some of the more toxic aspects of his friend's competitive mindset, but he also seemed blind to how their attitudes might affect people who didn't share their backgrounds or priorities. My discomfort with the group wasn't based on jealousy or insecurity about their success, but rather on their apparent inability to recognize that different kinds of work and education could be equally valuable and meaningful. They seemed to operate from an assumption that anyone who hadn't followed their particular path simply hadn't been smart enough, ambitious enough, or connected enough to achieve similar results. This worldview left little room for appreciating the contributions of teachers, small business owners, skilled tradespeople, or other professionals whose work might not generate high salaries but was essential for community well-being. The challenge became finding ways to maintain my relationship with David while establishing boundaries that protected my self-respect and values. I couldn't change his friends' attitudes or force them to appreciate perspectives they weren't interested in understanding, but I could control how much of my time and energy I invested in seeking their approval. The key was supporting David's friendships without compromising my own integrity or allowing their dismissive behavior to undermine my confidence in my own worth and achievements. As months passed and our relationship grew more serious, David began expressing interest in moving toward engagement and marriage. His vision for our future together included building careers that complemented each other, traveling to places we both wanted to explore, and eventually starting a family when we felt financially and emotionally ready for that responsibility. These conversations revealed alignment on major life goals and values that seemed more important than the social tensions with his business school friends. However, the prospect of formal engagement also meant deeper integration into David's social circle and family network, where the subtle class and education differences that had been manageable during casual dating might become more pronounced and problematic. His parents had been polite during our few interactions, but I sensed their uncertainty about their son's choice of a girlfriend who didn't fit their expectations for his eventual wife. His friends had settled into a pattern of surface-level acceptance that felt more like tolerance than genuine welcome. The approaching decision point about engagement forced me to consider whether I was prepared to build a life that included regular exposure to people who would always see me as somehow lesser than their preferred social circle. David's love and support provided a strong foundation, but marriage would mean joining not just his life but his entire social ecosystem. The question was whether I could maintain my own identity and values while navigating relationships with people who seemed determined to remind me that I didn't quite belong in their world. The internal conflict was complicated by my own ambitions and growing confidence in my professional abilities. The marketing agency where I worked had been growing steadily, and Janet had begun discussing the possibility of my taking on partnership responsibilities as the business expanded. My client relationships were generating referrals and repeat business that demonstrated real value and expertise. I was building a reputation in Boston's small business community that felt both satisfying and sustainable for long-term career development. This professional success provided a counterbalance to the social insecurities that David's friends seemed determined to cultivate. In my work environment, I was respected for my results and creativity rather than judged by my educational background or family wealth. My clients cared about whether my marketing strategies increased their revenue and customer engagement, not whether I'd attended the right schools or knew the right people. This professional validation helped me maintain perspective about the relative importance of social acceptance versus personal achievement and integrity. The contrast between these two worlds became increasingly stark as my relationship with David deepened. At work, I was seen as a rising professional with valuable expertise and growing influence. In David's social circle, I remained the girlfriend who didn't quite fit their standards for appropriate partnership material. The difference in how I was perceived and treated in these environments highlighted the arbitrary nature of social hierarchies based on background rather than merit or character. As David and I discussed engagement more seriously, I realized that accepting his proposal would require a kind of courage I hadn't previously needed to develop. It would mean committing to building a life with someone whose social circle might never fully accept me, while maintaining confidence in my own worth despite their persistent subtle messages to the contrary. The decision would test whether love and shared values could overcome social pressures and class prejudices that seemed designed to divide people who might otherwise find common ground and mutual respect. The engagement party took place at the Whitmore Club, an exclusive alumni venue overlooking Boston Harbor that David's friends had insisted on hosting as their gift to us. The elegant dining room featured floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing panoramic water views, crystal chandeliers that cast warm light over polished mahogany tables, and oil paintings of distinguished university founders whose stern expressions seemed to judge everyone who entered their domain. The setting was undeniably beautiful, but it also felt like a carefully constructed stage designed to emphasize who belonged in such spaces and who remained perpetual guests. Patricia Mitchell had coordinated the event with the efficiency of someone accustomed to organizing social gatherings that served multiple purposes beyond celebration. The guest list carefully balanced David's business school network with selected family friends, creating an atmosphere that felt more like professional networking than intimate celebration of our engagement. She'd chosen the menu, approved the floral arrangements, and even suggested the photographer, ensuring every detail reflected what she considered appropriate standards for her son's engagement announcement. My parents arrived early, having driven down from Medford in Dad's carefully maintained pickup truck that looked conspicuously out of place among the luxury sedans and SUVs in the club's valet parking area. Mom had purchased a new dress for the occasion, something she'd mentioned nervously several times during our planning conversations, and Dad wore his best suit, the one he'd bought for my college graduation and worn exactly 3 times since then. Their discomfort was subtle but noticeable to me, manifesting in slightly stiff posture and careful attention to etiquette they weren't sure they were executing correctly. Emma arrived with her boyfriend Marcus, a carpenter she'd been dating for 6 months who shared her artistic sensibilities and working-class background. They looked around the opulent venue with mixture of appreciation and slight bewilderment, clearly impressed by the elegance while also recognizing they were stepping into a world that operated by unfamiliar rules and expectations. Emma had chosen her outfit carefully, balancing professional appearance with personal style in ways that suggested someone trying to respect the venue's formality while maintaining individual identity. David's business school friends arrived fashionably late, a coordinated entrance that seemed designed to emphasize their importance and social sophistication. Brandon Wells wore a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, his confident stride and casual greetings suggesting someone completely comfortable in such exclusive surroundings. Jessica Chen had selected an elegant black dress that managed to be both understated and obviously expensive, her jewelry subtle but clearly genuine rather than the costume pieces most people our age could afford. Marcus Rodriguez entered with the kind of swagger that successful young men in finance often develop, his handshake firm and his eye contact direct in ways that seemed more about establishing dominance than expressing friendship. Ashley Hamilton looked effortlessly sophisticated in a way that comes from growing up with money, her outfit perfectly appropriate for the venue and occasion without appearing to require any conscious effort or planning. The cocktail hour proceeded with surface-level pleasantries and carefully orchestrated mingling that felt more like business networking than celebration of personal milestones. David moved easily between groups, introducing me to various guests with obvious pride and affection that helped counterbalance my growing nervousness about navigating conversations with people whose approval seemed both important and potentially impossible to earn. Brandon Wells approached our conversation circle with Jessica Chen and Ashley Hamilton, carrying drinks and wearing the kind of confident smile that suggested someone preparing to deliver entertainment rather than engage in genuine dialogue. His opening comment seemed innocent enough, a question about how David and I had met and developed our relationship, but his tone carried undertones of amusement that immediately put me on alert for whatever might be coming next. When I explained meeting David at Emma's friend's party and bonding over shared interests in behavioral economics and business strategy, Brandon's eyebrows raised with exaggerated surprise that felt deliberately theatrical. He made a comment about how fascinating it must be for David to date someone from such a different background, emphasizing the word different in ways that managed to sound both curious and condescending simultaneously. Jessica Chen joined the conversation with what appeared to be supportive interest, asking about my work at the marketing agency and expressing admiration for small business marketing challenges. However, her follow-up questions gradually revealed an underlying assumption that my work was somehow temporary or transitional, a stepping stone towards something more significant rather than a legitimate career path worthy of long-term commitment and professional development. Ashley Hamilton's contribution to the discussion focused on wedding planning, asking about venue preferences and timeline considerations with the kind of detailed interest that suggested genuine helpfulness. However, her suggestions consistently involved expensive options that seemed designed to test whether I understood the financial expectations associated with marrying into David's social circle, or perhaps to highlight the gap between my resources and what she considered appropriate standards. The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes, with each of David's friends contributing comments that individually seemed supportive but collectively created an atmosphere of subtle interrogation and evaluation. They asked about my family background with polite curiosity that felt more like intelligence gathering than genuine interest in getting to know my parents as people. They inquired about my educational experience at UMass Boston with tone that suggested they were trying to understand how someone with my academic background had managed to capture David's attention and commitment. Marcus Rodriguez eventually joined our group, having spent the first part of the evening networking with other guests who might prove useful for his venture capital work. His questions about my marketing expertise focused primarily on scalability and revenue potential, dismissing the community impact and client relationship aspects that I found most fulfilling about my career. When I mentioned helping local businesses survive economic challenges through improved digital presence, he responded with suggestions about consolidation and efficiency that completely missed the point of supporting independent entrepreneurship. The most uncomfortable moment came when Ashley Hamilton asked about our wedding planning timeline and budget considerations, her questions phrased as helpful concern but clearly designed to probe our financial situation and decision-making process. When I mentioned preferring a smaller, more intimate celebration that focused on meaningful relationships rather than impressive displays, her expression shifted to barely concealed surprise that suggested she couldn't understand why anyone would choose simplicity over an opportunity to demonstrate social status and financial success. David seemed oblivious to the undercurrents of these conversations, interpreting his friend's polite engagement as genuine acceptance and approval of our relationship. His excitement about sharing this milestone with people who'd been important parts of his life since business school prevented him from recognizing the subtle ways they were testing and evaluating me according to standards I hadn't been informed about and couldn't have met even with advanced preparation. The formal dinner portion of the evening provided temporary relief from the social minefield of cocktail conversation, as assigned seating and structured meal service created natural breaks in the intensive questioning and evaluation process. I found myself seated between David's uncle Thomas, a retired physician who asked thoughtful questions about marketing psychology, and his cousin Sarah, a social worker who showed genuine interest in my work with small businesses and seemed refreshingly unconcerned with social hierarchies or status markers. However, even during dinner, David's business school friends continued their subtle campaign of establishing my position within their social ecosystem. Brandon Wells raised a toast that managed to be both congratulatory and faintly insulting, expressing happiness that David had found someone who brings such a unique perspective to our group, with emphasis that made unique sound like diplomatic code for different and probably temporary. Jessica Chen's dinner conversation focused on career advancement opportunities, asking whether I'd considered pursuing additional education or transitioning to larger companies that might offer more prestige and higher compensation. Her suggestions were phrased as helpful advice, but they consistently implied that my current professional situation was somehow inadequate or inappropriate for someone planning to marry within their social circle. Ashley Hamilton spent much of the dinner discussing wedding planning with other guests, sharing details about recent ceremonies she'd attended at exclusive venues with price tags that seemed designed to establish expectations for what constituted appropriate celebration standards. Her descriptions of elaborate floral arrangements, designer dresses, and luxury honeymoon destinations created pressure to demonstrate similar financial resources and social aspirations or risk appearing cheap and unsuitable. The evening's most revealing moment came during coffee service, when the conversation shifted to future plans and career aspirations. Marcus Rodriguez asked David about his timeline for making partner at Sterling and Associates, then turned to me with apparent interest in my professional goals. When I mentioned my growing interest in eventually starting my own marketing consultancy focused on helping small businesses compete more effectively in digital markets, the table's reaction was telling. David's immediate enthusiasm and support contrasted sharply with his friend's polite but clearly skeptical responses. Brandon Wells made a comment about the challenges of entrepreneurship that sounded more like warning than encouragement. Jessica Chen asked detailed questions about market research and competitive analysis that seemed designed to highlight potential problems rather than explore opportunities. Ashley Hamilton inquired about funding sources and business model sustainability with tone that suggested someone trying to point out obstacles rather than offer constructive guidance. The contrast between their responses to David's conventional career progression and their skepticism about my entrepreneurial aspirations revealed underlying assumptions about who was qualified to take business risks and pursue independent ventures. David's path toward partnership at an established consulting firm represented the kind of predictable success they understood and approved of, while my interest in building something from scratch apparently struck them as unrealistic or inappropriate for someone with my background and resources. As the evening concluded and guests began departing, I overheard fragments of conversations that confirmed my suspicions about how David's friends truly perceived our relationship. Standing near the coat check while David retrieved our jackets, I caught Jessica Chen's comment to Ashley Hamilton about how interesting it was that David had chosen someone so different from his usual type, with emphasis that made interesting sound like polite code for questionable judgment. Brandon Wells was less subtle in his assessment, making a comment to Marcus Rodriguez about hoping that David knew what he was getting into with someone from such a different social and economic background. His tone suggested concern about potential gold-digging motivations rather than genuine worry about compatibility or happiness, revealing assumptions about my character and intentions that were both insulting and entirely unfounded. The ride home was quiet, with David expressing satisfaction about how well the evening had gone and gratitude toward his friends for hosting such an elegant celebration. His positive interpretation of the event stood in stark contrast to my experience of subtle interrogation and social evaluation, creating a disconnect that I wasn't sure how to address without seeming ungrateful or oversensitive about what might have been innocent social awkwardness rather than deliberate condescension. The engagement party crystallized concerns that had been building throughout our relationship about the long-term viability of maintaining my self-respect and confidence while navigating David's social circle. The evening had confirmed that his friends viewed me as an outsider who might be temporarily tolerated but would never be genuinely accepted as an equal member of their group. Their polite surface behavior masked deeper reservations about my suitability as David's partner based on class prejudices and educational snobbery that seemed immune to evidence of my actual character or capabilities. The weeks following the engagement party brought increased scrutiny and unsolicited advice from David's family and friends about wedding planning, career development, and lifestyle choices that felt more like attempts at social conditioning than helpful guidance. Patricia Mitchell began sharing articles about appropriate venues, vendors, and traditions that reflected her vision of what constituted a suitable celebration for her son's wedding. Her suggestions consistently involved expensive options that seemed designed to test our financial resources and commitment to maintaining certain social standards. David's friends continued their pattern of offering advice that felt more like subtle criticism or attempts to reshape my priorities according to their values and expectations. Brandon Wells suggested I consider pursuing an MBA to expand my professional opportunities, phrasing the recommendation as career guidance while implying that my current education was somehow inadequate. Jessica Chen recommended networking events and professional organizations that might help me elevate my client base, suggesting that working with small businesses was beneath someone planning to marry within their social circle. The pressure was subtle but persistent, creating an atmosphere where my choices and preferences were constantly being evaluated against standards I hadn't agreed to and couldn't meet without fundamentally changing who I was as a person.
Outright insult. The confrontation ended with uncomfortable silence and David's obvious embarrassment about the tension between his fiancée and one of his closest friends. The incident forced him to recognize that the social dynamics he'd been interpreting as minor adjustments were actually fundamental conflicts about values and respect that couldn't be resolved through patience and goodwill alone. The evening marked the beginning of more serious conversations about how we would navigate the class and cultural differences that seemed to create persistent friction within his social circle. The aftermath of the dinner party confrontation revealed the extent to which David's friends had been discussing their concerns about our relationship in private conversations that hadn't included either of us. Jessica Chen called David the next day to express worry about my defensive attitude and suggest that I might need help adjusting to the social expectations associated with his family and professional network. Her framing of the conflict as my problem rather than Marcus's inappropriate behavior revealed how completely she misunderstood the situation and the legitimate reasons for my response. Brandon Wells sent David a text message expressing concern about relationship dynamics that might affect his friend's career advancement and social standing, suggesting that some of their mutual acquaintances had been questioning David's judgment about marriage choices.
His message implied that continuing our relationship might have professional and social consequences that David should consider carefully before proceeding with wedding plans. Ashley Hamilton chose a more subtle approach, inviting David to lunch to discuss wedding planning details while also sharing observations about social dynamics and compatibility concerns that she felt obligated to mention as a caring friend. Her comments about the importance of social harmony and shared values in successful marriages were designed to plant seeds of doubt about our relationship's long-term viability without appearing to directly criticize me or interfere in David's personal choices. The coordinated campaign of concern and advice from his three closest friends created pressure on David to reconsider our relationship or at least demand changes in my behavior and attitudes that would make me more acceptable to his social circle. The situation forced him to choose between supporting his fiancée's right to respect and dignity or maintaining harmony with friends who'd been important parts of his life since business school. His response to this pressure would determine whether our relationship could survive the class and cultural conflicts that his friends seemed determined to make central issues in our marriage. David's response to his friend's coordinated pressure campaign revealed both his genuine love for me and his struggle to navigate conflicting loyalties that had never before required difficult choices. He spent several days processing their concerns before initiating what would become the most honest conversation we'd ever had about the social dynamics affecting our relationship. His approach was careful and diplomatic, clearly torn between defending me and maintaining relationships that had been important to him for years. The conversation took place on a quiet Sunday morning in his apartment, away from the social pressures and external influences that had been complicating our ability to address these issues directly. David began by acknowledging that he'd been aware of tension between me and his friends but had hoped the conflicts would resolve naturally as everyone became more comfortable with each other. His admission revealed both naivety about the depth of the class prejudices involved and genuine surprise that people he cared about could harbor such dismissive attitudes towards someone he loved. David's account of his friends' recent conversations shocked me with their brazenness and coordinated nature. Brandon Wells had questioned whether I truly loved David or was primarily motivated by access to his family's wealth and social connections, suggesting that my resistance to their advice revealed ulterior motives rather than principled disagreement with their values. Jessica Chen had expressed concern that my stubborn independence might prevent me from adapting to the social expectations that came with being part of their circle, framing my self-respect as problematic inflexibility. Marcus Rodriguez had been the most explicit in his criticism, arguing that David was making a mistake by marrying someone who couldn't appreciate the advantages and opportunities available through his family and professional network. His comments had focused on my career choices as evidence of fundamental incompatibility, suggesting that someone truly committed to building a life with David would prioritize financial advancement and social climbing over personal satisfaction and professional integrity. Ashley Hamilton had taken a more sophisticated approach, expressing admiration for my independence while questioning whether such strong individual identity was compatible with the kind of partnership required for successful marriage within their social stratum. Her concerns about potential conflicts between my values and the expectations of David's family and professional community were designed to sound thoughtful and caring while actually questioning my suitability as a long-term partner. The revelation of these conversations forced David to confront the reality that his friend's polite surface behavior had been masking profound disrespect for both me personally and the relationship we'd built together. Their willingness to discuss such intimate concerns about his marriage choice without including either of us in the conversation revealed a presumption of authority over his personal decisions that was both inappropriate and deeply offensive. David's initial reaction was anger at his friends for overstepping boundaries and making assumptions about my character and motivations that contradicted everything he knew about me. However, his anger was complicated by genuine confusion about how to handle the situation without destroying relationships that had been central to his social life since business school. The prospect of choosing between his fiancée and his closest friends created stress that manifested in sleepless nights and distracted behavior at work. My response to these revelations was a mixture of hurt, anger, and relief that the subtle hostility I'd been experiencing was finally acknowledged and validated. The knowledge that David's friends had been actively working to undermine our relationship while maintaining facades of friendship and support felt like a betrayal that extended beyond their treatment of me to include their manipulation of David's emotions and loyalties. The conversation evolved into a broader discussion about the kind of life we wanted to build together and the role that external approval would play in our decision-making process. David's struggle with his friends' disapproval revealed how deeply he valued their opinions and how difficult it would be for him to maintain relationships with people who couldn't respect his choice of life partner. The situation was forcing him to examine priorities and loyalties that he'd never previously questioned. I explained that my resistance to his friend's advice wasn't based on stubbornness or inability to appreciate opportunities, but rather on recognition that their suggestions required me to compromise values and identity in ways that would ultimately damage both my self-respect and our relationship. Their vision of who I should become to be suitable for David involved fundamental changes to my personality, career priorities, and social values that would transform me into someone neither of us would recognize or genuinely respect. The discussion revealed that David had been feeling pressure not just from his friends but also from his family,
Nice.
particularly his mother, who had been sharing concerns about social compatibility and long-term relationship sustainability. Patricia Mitchell's worries focused on practical considerations like entertaining expectations, charitable involvement requirements, and social obligations that came with David's professional advancement and family position. David's father had been more direct in expressing reservations about our class differences, questioning whether someone from my background would be comfortable with the lifestyle changes that marriage would require and whether I understood the social and professional expectations that would affect both of our careers. His concerns weren't entirely unreasonable, but they were based on assumptions about my adaptability and character that reflected class prejudices rather than actual knowledge of my capabilities and values. The accumulating pressure from friends and family had been affecting David's confidence in our relationship in ways he'd been reluctant to acknowledge or discuss. Their consistent message that he was making a mistake by choosing someone so different from their social expectations had planted seeds of doubt about long-term compatibility that were now requiring careful examination and conscious rejection. Our conversation continued for hours, covering topics we'd been avoiding since the engagement party and addressing fundamental questions about how we would handle external pressures throughout our marriage. David's willingness to have these difficult discussions demonstrated his commitment to our relationship, but it also revealed the extent to which his social circle's approval had been important to his sense of confidence and security. The resolution we reached involved establishing clearer boundaries with his friends and family about their involvement in our relationship decisions and life choices. David agreed to address their inappropriate comments and behavior directly, making it clear that continued friendship required respect for both me and our marriage. This conversation would be challenging but necessary for preserving relationships while protecting our partnership from further interference and manipulation. However, the opportunity for David to address these issues diplomatically was eliminated when Brandon Wells decided to escalate the situation through a confrontation that revealed the full extent of his contempt for me and determination to end our relationship. The incident occurred at David's birthday celebration, an annual gathering that had been planned before our recent conversations but couldn't be canceled without creating additional social drama and conflict. The party took place at Brandon's family's estate in Wellesley, a sprawling property that showcased the kind of generational wealth that David's friends considered normal and appropriate for their social circle. The setting was deliberately intimidating, designed to emphasize the class differences that Brandon and his allies had been using as weapons against our relationship since the engagement party. The guest list included not just David's business school friends but also their broader network of colleagues, family members, and social connections. The evening began with the familiar pattern of polite surface interactions masking underlying hostility and evaluation. Jessica Chen and Ashley Hamilton maintained their usual approach of subtle condescension disguised as helpful interest, asking questions about wedding planning and career development that carried implications about my suitability and understanding of appropriate expectations. Their behavior had the practiced quality of people who'd perfected the art of maintaining plausible deniability while delivering psychological warfare. Marcus Rodriguez focused his attention on David engaging in conversations about business opportunities and professional networking that excluded me while emphasizing the kinds of connections and advantages that came with maintaining appropriate social relationships. His message was clear without being explicitly stated: choosing the wrong marriage partner could limit access to the professional and social benefits that their network provided. The confrontation that would change everything occurred during the cocktail hour, when Brandon Wells approached me while David was engaged in conversation with other guests across the room. His opening comments seemed designed to appear casual and friendly to anyone who might be observing our interaction, but his tone and body language conveyed aggressive intent that immediately put me on alert for whatever attack he was planning to launch. Brandon began by expressing admiration for my persistence in maintaining the relationship despite what he characterized as obvious incompatibility and social challenges that would only become more pronounced over time. His comments were phrased as concern for both David's future and my own happiness, suggesting that continuing our engagement would ultimately damage both of our lives and careers in ways we were too naive or stubborn to recognize. When I responded with polite disagreement and confidence in our relationship's strength and compatibility, Brandon's approach shifted from false concern to direct attack. He suggested that my refusal to acknowledge obvious problems revealed either deliberate manipulation or genuine delusion about my ability to adapt to David's social and professional requirements. His implications about my motivations became increasingly explicit and offensive. The conversation reached its breaking point when Brandon stated directly that everyone in their social circle understood I was marrying David for financial security and social advancement rather than genuine love, and that my resistance to their guidance revealed the gold-digging motivations they'd suspected from the beginning. His accusation was delivered with the confident malice of someone who believed he held all the power in the situation and could destroy my relationship with impunity. My response was immediate and uncompromising. I told Brandon that his assumptions about my character and motivations revealed more about his own shallow values and inability to understand authentic relationships than they did about my actual feelings for David. I pointed out that his obsession with money and social status as measures of human worth explained his inability to recognize that some people were capable of loving others for reasons that had nothing to do with financial advantage or social climbing. The confrontation escalated when Brandon suggested that David would eventually recognize his mistake and end our relationship once he understood the social and professional costs of marrying beneath his class and educational background. His confidence in this prediction revealed the extent to which he and his friends had been working to undermine David's confidence in our relationship and their assumption that sustained pressure would eventually achieve their goal of breaking us up. I informed Brandon that his interference in our relationship was both inappropriate and ineffective, and that his continued attempts to manipulate David's emotions and loyalties revealed desperation about losing influence over a friend who was developing independent judgment about important life decisions. My comments about his insecurity and need for control struck closer to home than I'd anticipated, triggering a response that revealed his true character. Brandon's final comments abandoned all pretense of civilized behavior or plausible deniability about his intentions. He stated explicitly that I would never be accepted by their social circle, that my marriage to David would damage his career and social standing, and that everyone understood I was a temporary mistake he would eventually correct once he matured enough to recognize appropriate partnership choices. The confrontation ended when David appeared at my side, having been alerted by other guests who'd noticed the intensity of our conversation and Brandon's increasingly aggressive body language. His immediate assessment of the situation and demand for explanation from Brandon revealed that our recent conversations had prepared him to recognize and address exactly this kind of behavior from his friends. Brandon's attempt to justify his comments by framing them as honest concern for David's future was met with immediate rejection and anger that surprised everyone present, including Brandon himself. David's response was clear and unambiguous. Brandon's behavior was unacceptable. His assumptions about my character were insulting and incorrect, and continued friendship would require immediate apology and fundamental change in attitude toward our relationship. The public nature of the confrontation and David's unequivocal support for me sent shockwaves through the party and the broader social network that had been watching our relationship with varying degrees of skepticism and hostility. The incident forced other guests to choose sides in a conflict that could no longer be ignored or dismissed as minor social friction between different personality types. Jessica Chen and Ashley Hamilton found themselves in the uncomfortable position of having their own subtle hostility exposed and connected to Brandon's more explicit attack. Their attempts to distance themselves from his behavior while maintaining their own critical attitudes toward our relationship created cognitive dissonance that other guests noticed and questioned. Marcus Rodriguez's reaction revealed his cowardice and unwillingness to stand behind views he'd been expressing privately for months. His sudden shift toward neutrality and diplomatic comments about misunderstandings suggested someone who'd been happy to participate in undermining our relationship as long as the attacks remained subtle and deniable. The aftermath of the birthday party confrontation marked the end of David's relationship with Brandon Wells and fundamentally changed his connections with Jessica Chen, Ashley Hamilton, and Marcus Rodriguez. The incident had forced him to recognize that these weren't friendships worth preserving if they required accepting disrespect toward the person he'd chosen to marry and build a life with. David's decision to prioritize our relationship over maintaining harmony with his business school friends created temporary social isolation but also opened space for building healthier relationships with people who could appreciate both of us as individuals. The process was initially lonely and disorienting, particularly for someone who'd been part of a tight social group since graduate school, but it ultimately led to more authentic and supportive friendships. The months following the confrontation brought unexpected peace and clarity to our relationship as external pressures and influences were eliminated or dramatically reduced. Without the constant need to defend our choices and values against subtle attacks and manipulation, we were able to focus on building the kind of partnership we actually wanted rather than one that would satisfy other people's expectations and approval. My career at the marketing agency continued to flourish without the distraction of social pressures and criticism about my professional choices. Janet's growing confidence in my abilities led to expanded responsibilities and discussions about partnership opportunities that aligned with my long-term goals of building a business focused on helping small companies compete effectively in digital markets. The freedom from social obligations and networking requirements that had consumed significant time and energy allowed me to focus more intensively on developing marketing strategies and client relationships that generated both professional satisfaction and measurable business results. Without the need to attend events and maintain relationships with people who disapproved of my career choices, I could invest more time in work that felt meaningful and aligned with my values. David's career advancement at Sterling and Associates continued without the support of his former friend's professional network, but his individual performance and client relationships proved sufficient for achieving the partnership track position he'd been working toward. The experience taught him valuable lessons about depending on his own merit rather than social connections for professional success. Our wedding planning process became infinitely more enjoyable once we eliminated the pressure to satisfy external expectations about venue, guest list, and celebration style. The intimate ceremony we ultimately chose reflected our actual preferences and values rather than attempting to meet standards imposed by people who wouldn't be part of our long-term happiness anyway. The year following our marriage brought professional opportunities that neither of us could have anticipated during the social conflicts that had dominated our engagement period. My marketing expertise had attracted attention from several small business networks, leading to consulting opportunities that allowed me to work with a broader range of clients while maintaining the focus on community impact that made my career fulfilling. David's consulting work had evolved towards serving mid-sized companies that needed strategic guidance but couldn't afford services from major firms like Sterling and Associates. His interest in eventually starting an independent practice was gaining momentum as he built relationships with potential clients and developed expertise in serving businesses that weren't typically targeted by large consulting firms. The combination of our professional growth and personal stability created opportunities for conversations about starting a family and building long-term wealth that could support both our lifestyle goals and our desire to give back to communities that had supported our development. These discussions revealed shared values about financial responsibility, professional achievement, and social contribution that formed a solid foundation for making important life decisions together. The idea for local reach solutions emerged from these conversations about combining our expertise and resources to build something that could serve businesses we cared about while generating the kind of financial success that would provide security and independence. David's strategic consulting background complemented my marketing expertise in ways that suggested we could offer small and medium businesses comprehensive support for growth and competitive positioning. The business plan we developed focused on providing integrated marketing and operational consulting services to businesses that were too small for major consulting firms but too sophisticated for basic marketing services. Our target clients included family restaurants looking to expand their market reach, retail businesses adapting to digital competition, and service companies trying to scale their operations while maintaining quality and customer relationships. The initial funding for local reach solutions came from our combined savings and a small business loan that David's family connections helped secure, though his parents' support was cautious and conditional rather than enthusiastic. Patricia and Richard Mitchell remained skeptical about entrepreneurial ventures that involved financial risk and uncertainty, preferring the stability and prestige of corporate career advancement. However, their skepticism was balanced by grudging respect for our careful planning and professional expertise, particularly as David's consulting background provided credibility and strategic framework for the business model. Their eventual financial support came with extensive discussion about risk management and exit strategies, but it also represented acknowledgement that we were capable of making sound business decisions without their oversight or approval. The first year of Local Reach Solutions exceeded our most optimistic projections for client acquisition and revenue generation. Our integrated approach to marketing and operational consulting filled a genuine gap in the market, providing small businesses with access to sophisticated strategic guidance they couldn't obtain elsewhere. The combination of David's analytical framework and my marketing creativity produced results that impressed both clients and industry observers. Our client success stories began attracting attention from business publications and industry associations interested in innovative approaches to small business consulting. Articles about our work appeared in local business journals and marketing trade publications, establishing our reputation as experts in helping smaller companies compete effectively against larger competitors with superior resources.
The school's independence and character.
My offer to purchase Whitmore for $180 million was initially met with surprise and skepticism from board members who couldn't understand why someone would want to own a business school that was facing significant operational challenges. However, my detailed plans for revitalizing the institution through innovative programming and community partnerships eventually convinced them that the sale would benefit both current students and long-term institutional sustainability. The acquisition of Whitmore Business School was motivated by multiple factors beyond the obvious satisfaction of owning the institution that had produced the friends who'd tried to destroy my relationship with David. The school's location and facilities provided opportunities for creating innovative educational programs that could serve working adults and small business owners who couldn't access traditional MBA programs. My vision for Whitmore included developing continuing education programs for entrepreneurs, executive training for small business leaders, and community outreach initiatives that would make business education accessible to people from backgrounds similar to my own. The school's prestige and resources could be redirected towards serving populations that had been historically excluded from elite business education. The announcement of my purchase of Whitmore Business School created significant media attention and industry discussion about the unusual circumstances of a relatively young entrepreneur acquiring such an established institution. Business publications were particularly interested in the story of someone who'd been dismissed by the school's alumni network ultimately becoming the owner of their alma mater. Brandon Wells, Jessica Chen, Marcus Rodriguez, and Ashley Hamilton learned about the acquisition through news coverage rather than direct communication, as we'd had no contact since the birthday party confrontation 3 years earlier. Their reactions, conveyed through mutual acquaintances, reportedly ranged from shock to indignation to grudging admiration for the financial success that had enabled such a dramatic reversal of fortune. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone familiar with the history of their treatment of me and their assumptions about my character and motivations. The people who'd accused me of marrying David for money and social advancement were forced to confront the reality that I'd achieved both wealth and social position through my own efforts while building a marriage based on genuine love and mutual respect. David's reaction to my decision to purchase Whitmore was a mixture of pride, amusement, and slight concern about the public attention and potential controversy that might surround such a high-profile acquisition. However, his support for my vision of transforming the institution into something more inclusive and community-focused was unwavering, reflecting the shared values that had sustained our relationship through previous challenges. The first year of owning Whitmore Business School involved intensive strategic planning and operational restructuring to implement the educational innovations and community programs I'd envisioned. The process required hiring new faculty, developing curriculum for non-traditional students, and building partnerships with small business organizations throughout New England. The changes at Whitmore initially faced resistance from some alumni and faculty members who preferred traditional approaches to business education that emphasized elite networking and corporate placement over entrepreneurship and community engagement. However, the results of our new programs quickly demonstrated their value and attracted support from students and business leaders who appreciated their practical focus and accessibility. Enrollment at Whitmore increased significantly as word spread about innovative programs that served working professionals and aspiring entrepreneurs who couldn't commit to full-time traditional MBA programs. The school's financial position stabilized and began improving as our diversified programming attracted students from broader demographic and geographic markets than the institution had previously served. The success of Whitmore's transformation attracted national attention from education publications and business organizations interested in replicating our model of making elite business education more accessible and community-focused. Speaking engagements and consulting opportunities related to educational innovation added another dimension to my professional portfolio while advancing causes I cared deeply about. The personal satisfaction of proving Brandon Wells and his allies wrong about my character and capabilities was significant. But it was ultimately less important than the knowledge that I'd built something meaningful that would benefit people facing challenges similar to those I'd encountered earlier in my career. The acquisition of Whitmore represented both personal vindication and professional achievement that aligned with my values and long-term goals. 5 years after the birthday party confrontation that had ended David's friendships with his business school classmates, we received wedding invitations from both Jessica Chen and Ashley Hamilton, who had apparently reconsidered their previous judgments about our relationship and wanted to rebuild social connections. Their invitations included handwritten notes expressing admiration for our professional achievements and hope that past misunderstandings could be forgiven and forgotten. David and I discussed these invitations extensively before deciding to decline them politely but definitively. While we bore no active resentment toward his former friends, we also recognized that our lives had moved in directions that made resuming those relationships unnecessary and potentially problematic. The people we'd become and the values we'd embraced were fundamentally incompatible with the social dynamics that had characterized our previous interactions. Our current social circle includes friends and colleagues who appreciate us for who we actually are rather than evaluating us according to external standards of appropriateness or social acceptability. These relationships are built on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine affection rather than networking opportunities or status considerations, creating the kind of authentic connections that sustain long-term happiness and personal growth. The journey from dismissed fiancé to university owner taught me invaluable lessons about the importance of maintaining personal integrity regardless of external pressures or social expectations. The people who matter most in life are those who can appreciate your authentic self rather than trying to reshape you according to their preferences or prejudices. Success isn't about proving others wrong, but about building a life that reflects your values and contributes meaningfully to causes you care about. Looking back on the challenges we faced during our engagement and early marriage, I'm grateful for the experiences that forced us to clarify our priorities and develop resilience that has served us well in both personal and professional contexts. The conflicts with David's former friends, while painful at the time, ultimately strengthened our relationship by eliminating external influences that were undermining our ability to build the kind of partnership we actually wanted. Today, as I sit in my office overlooking Boston Common, reviewing applications for Whitmore's scholarship programs that provide business education opportunities for first-generation college students from working-class backgrounds, I'm reminded daily that the most meaningful success comes from using your advantages to create opportunities for others facing challenges you once navigated yourself. The transformation from marketing coordinator earning modest salary to business owner generating eight-figure annual revenue wasn't just about financial advancement or social position, but about developing the confidence and capabilities necessary for building something that matters. The acquisition of Whitmore Business School represents not just personal achievement but commitment to ensuring that educational opportunities aren't limited by social class or family background. David and I continue to work together at both Meridian Business Solutions and in our philanthropic efforts through the Mitchell Foundation, which provides microloans and consulting services to aspiring entrepreneurs from underserved communities. Our marriage has evolved into true partnership that combines romantic love with shared professional mission and mutual respect for each other's individual strengths and contributions. The vindication I initially sought by proving Brandon Wells and his friends wrong has been replaced by deeper satisfaction that comes from building a meaningful life that serves purposes beyond personal gratification or social status. The recognition that their approval was never necessary for my happiness or success has been liberating in ways that extend far beyond our specific conflicts to encompass broader questions about self-worth and authentic achievement. The story of being dismissed as a gold digger and ultimately buying the university that produced my critics serves as a reminder that other people's limitations and prejudices don't determine your potential or destiny. The most powerful response to those who underestimate you isn't anger or resentment, but the quiet confidence that comes from building something significant while maintaining your integrity and values. The pivotal moment in my transformation from marketing coordinator to digital entrepreneur began with a seemingly routine client consultation that would reshape everything I thought I knew about business potential and market opportunity. Kevin Park had contacted our agency through a referral from one of my longtime restaurant clients seeking help with marketing a software platform he'd developed during his computer science studies at MIT. His initial budget was modest, barely covering basic website optimization and social media setup, but his technology represented something genuinely innovative that captured my imagination immediately. Kevin's platform addressed a problem I'd encountered repeatedly while working with small business clients: the difficulty of managing customer relationships, inventory tracking, and digital marketing campaigns through multiple disconnected systems that rarely communicated effectively with each other. His integrated solution promised to streamline these essential functions into a single user-friendly interface that could adapt to different business types while maintaining the sophisticated analytics capabilities that larger companies took for granted. During our initial meeting at a coffee shop near MIT, Kevin demonstrated his platform using data from a local bakery that had been beta testing the system for 3 months. The results were impressive. Customer retention had improved by 35%, inventory waste had decreased by 20%, and social media engagement had tripled through automated but personalized customer communications. More importantly, the bakery owner had been able to reduce the time spent on administrative tasks by 15 hours per week, allowing more focus on product development and customer service. Kevin's background was similar to mine in many ways. He'd grown up in a working-class family in Somerville, worked multiple part-time jobs throughout college to minimize student loan debt, and developed his software skills through a combination of formal education and self-directed learning that supplemented classroom instruction. His motivation for creating the platform stemmed from watching his parents struggle to manage their small automotive repair shop using outdated systems that created more problems than they solved. The partnership that emerged from our initial consultation felt natural and inevitable. Kevin possessed extraordinary technical skills and deep understanding of small business operational challenges, but he lacked experience in marketing, customer acquisition, and the relationship-building aspects of growing a service-based company. My expertise in digital marketing, client communication, and understanding small business psychology complemented his technical abilities in ways that suggested we could build something significant together. Our first collaborative project involved redesigning the marketing approach for Kevin's platform, which he'd been calling Business Hub with typical programmer creativity. The name was accurate but uninspiring, and his website looked like it had been designed by someone who understood databases better than human psychology. I suggested rebranding the platform as Local Reach Solutions to emphasize its focus on helping small businesses expand their market reach through better customer relationship management and integrated digital marketing. The rebranding process revealed Kevin's willingness to defer to marketing expertise while maintaining strong opinions about technical functionality and user experience design. Our working relationship developed quickly into genuine friendship built on mutual respect for each other's professional capabilities and shared commitment to serving small businesses that were often underserved by technology companies focused on larger, more profitable clients. The success of our initial collaboration led to discussions about formalizing our partnership and expanding beyond just marketing Kevin's existing platform. We began exploring possibilities for developing additional tools and services that could address other challenges we'd identified through our combined client experience. The potential for building a comprehensive business solution that could genuinely transform how small companies competed in digital markets became increasingly exciting as we refined our ideas through countless late-night conversations and weekend brainstorming sessions. Emma's graphic design expertise proved invaluable as we developed branding and user interface concepts that would make sophisticated technology accessible to business owners who might be intimidated by complex software systems. Her ability to translate technical functionality into visual narratives that emphasized benefits rather than features helped us create marketing materials that resonated with our target market while maintaining professional credibility. David's strategic consulting background provided frameworks for analyzing market opportunity and competitive positioning that neither Kevin nor I possessed through our more specialized professional experience. His objective perspective on our business model helped us identify potential challenges and revenue streams that we might have overlooked without systematic strategic analysis. More importantly, his enthusiasm for our venture provided emotional support during the inevitable moments of self-doubt that accompany any entrepreneurial leap. The decision to leave my position at the marketing agency was both terrifying and exhilarating. Janet had been a wonderful mentor who'd provided opportunities for professional growth and creative freedom that many people never experience in corporate environments. However, the potential for building something that could serve thousands of small businesses rather than dozens was too compelling to ignore, especially when combined with the prospect of true financial independence and professional autonomy. Kevin made his transition more gradually, reducing his MIT research responsibilities while maintaining enough income to support himself during the early stages of our business development. His approach was more cautious than mine, reflecting both his family's financial circumstances and his realistic assessment of the time required to transform a promising prototype into a commercially viable product that could generate sustainable revenue. The initial funding for Local Reach Solutions came from our combined personal savings, supplemented by a small business loan that required personal guarantees from both Kevin and me. The financial risk was significant enough to make our families nervous, but not so overwhelming that failure would create permanent financial disaster. We deliberately kept our initial overhead low, working from Kevin's apartment and investing primarily in technology infrastructure and legal services necessary for protecting our intellectual property and establishing appropriate business structures. Our first official client was the bakery that had been beta testing Kevin's platform, and their willingness to pay for services rather than just providing feedback represented a crucial validation of our business model. The monthly recurring revenue from their account was modest, but it proved that small businesses would invest in technology solutions that delivered measurable value and improved their operational efficiency. Word-of-mouth referrals from our initial clients generated steady growth in our customer base throughout our first year of operation. Each new client provided opportunities for refining our platform capabilities and customer service processes while building the track record of success stories that would become essential for attracting larger clients and potential investors. The personal attention we could provide as a small company became a competitive advantage against larger technology firms that treated small business clients as low-priority accounts. The relationship challenges that emerged during this entrepreneurial phase tested both my partnership with Kevin and my marriage with David in ways that revealed fundamental compatibility and shared values that might not have been apparent under less stressful circumstances. Building a business requires constant decision-making under uncertainty, financial pressure that affects personal relationships, and time commitments that can strain even strong partnerships if not managed carefully. Kevin and I discovered that our working styles complemented each other effectively despite significant differences in our approaches to problem-solving and risk management. His methodical, analytical approach to technical challenges balanced my more intuitive, relationship-focused approach to customer service and business development. Our occasional disagreements about priorities and strategies were resolved through open communication and mutual respect for each other's expertise and judgment. David's support during this period was both practical and emotional. He helped with financial planning and business strategy while also managing household responsibilities that allowed me to focus intensively on building the company during its most critical early months. His understanding of the time and energy requirements for entrepreneurial success meant he never made me feel guilty about working late nights and weekends or missing social events that might have seemed more important to someone less familiar with business building demands. The first major milestone in our company's development came when we reached 50 active clients and achieved monthly recurring revenue that exceeded both Kevin's and my previous salaries combined. This financial sustainability provided confidence for making additional investments in technology development and marketing that would support continued growth and market expansion. Our client success stories began attracting attention from business publications and industry associations interested in innovative approaches to small business technology solutions. An article in Boston Business Journal about our work with local retailers generated dozens of inquiries from potential clients throughout New England, forcing us to develop more systematic sales and onboarding processes to handle increased demand for our services. The recognition and growth opportunities that emerged from this publicity led to our first significant strategic decision about whether to pursue venture capital funding that would accelerate expansion but also introduce external investors with their own priorities and expectations. After extensive research and consultation with lawyers and business advisors, Kevin and I decided to maintain our independence for at least another year while building the operational infrastructure that would support sustainable growth without external funding pressures. This decision reflected our shared commitment to maintaining control over our company culture and service quality while building long-term value rather than pursuing rapid growth that might compromise the customer relationships and product excellence that had been driving our success. We'd seen too many small technology companies sacrifice their founding principles for venture capital funding that ultimately failed to produce promised results while destroying the qualities that had made them attractive investments in the first place. The second year of Local Reach Solutions operation brought challenges that tested our business model and operational capabilities in ways that ultimately strengthened both our market position and our partnership dynamics. Increased competition from larger companies that had noticed our success required continuous innovation in both technology features and customer service approaches that would maintain our competitive advantages despite resource limitations. We addressed competitive pressure by deepening our focus on customer relationships and service quality that larger companies couldn't replicate due to their scale and organizational structure. Our ability to provide personalized consultation, rapid technical support, and custom feature development for individual clients became increasingly valuable as small businesses recognized the benefits of working with partners who understood their specific needs and challenges. The expansion of our team from just Kevin and me to 8 employees brought new management responsibilities that required developing leadership skills neither of us had needed in previous roles. Hiring decisions, performance management, and organizational culture development became central concerns that affected both our day-to-day operations and our long-term strategic planning. Kevin's evolution from programmer to technical leader demonstrated natural management abilities that surprised both of us. His patient, methodical approach to problem-solving translated effectively to mentoring junior developers and coordinating complex projects that required both technical expertise and diplomatic communication with clients who didn't understand software development processes. My own development as a business leader involved learning to balance the relationship-building skills that had always been my strength with the analytical and systematic approaches necessary for managing larger-scale operations. The marketing and customer service functions that had come naturally when working with individual clients became more complex when coordinated across multiple team members serving dozens of active accounts simultaneously. The financial success that accompanied our business growth created personal opportunities and lifestyle changes that felt both rewarding and slightly overwhelming. The transition from worrying about monthly expenses to having genuine financial security happened gradually but represented a fundamental shift in how we could approach both personal and professional decisions. My relationship with David's family improved significantly once our business success became undeniable and generated the kind of recognition that they understood and respected. Patricia Mitchell's attitude toward me shifted from polite skepticism to genuine interest in my professional achievements and business insights. Her questions about entrepreneurship and technology became more thoughtful and less evaluative, suggesting authentic curiosity rather than attempts to assess my suitability as David's wife. Richard Mitchell's medical practice had been struggling with patient management and billing systems that could benefit from the kind of integrated technology solutions that Local Reach had been developing for small businesses. Our conversations about his operational challenges led to consulting work that improved both his practice efficiency and our understanding of professional service business requirements that differed from retail and restaurant operations. However, the most significant development during our second year of operation was the acquisition interest we began receiving from larger consulting and technology companies that recognized the value of our client relationships and integrated platform capabilities. These initial inquiries were preliminary and speculative, but they represented validation of our business model and market position that exceeded our most optimistic projections. The acquisition discussions that began as casual conversations about industry trends evolved into serious negotiations about purchase terms and integration strategies that could benefit both our existing clients and our team's career development. The prospect of selling Local Reach solutions required careful consideration of financial opportunities, professional goals, and personal values that would determine our long-term happiness and sense of purpose. The offer from Meridian Business Solutions that ultimately led to our acquisition represented everything we'd hoped to achieve through building Local Reach while also providing resources and market reach that could amplify our impact far beyond what we could accomplish as an independent company. Their commitment to maintaining our operational autonomy and client service approach addressed our primary concerns about corporate acquisition while providing financial compensation that would create genuine wealth and long-term security. Kevin and I spent weeks analyzing the acquisition offer and discussing its implications for our professional partnership, our employees, and our clients before ultimately deciding that the opportunity aligned with both our business goals and our personal values. The $150 million purchase price represented validation of everything we'd built together while providing resources for continuing our mission of helping small businesses compete more effectively in digital markets. The acquisition process itself was both exhilarating and exhausting, requiring extensive due diligence, legal negotiations, and strategic planning that consumed months of intensive work while also maintaining our ongoing client service responsibilities. The complexity of transferring ownership while preserving the company culture and operational excellence that had driven our success demanded careful attention to details that could affect both short-term performance and long-term strategic objectives. The personal transformation that accompanied our business success extended beyond financial security to encompass confidence, social recognition, and opportunities for impact that had been impossible to imagine when we'd started Local Reach with modest personal savings and ambitious dreams. The journey from marketing coordinator and graduate student to successful entrepreneurs had required persistence, creativity, and mutual support that strengthened both our professional partnership and our individual capabilities. The decision to use a portion of our acquisition proceeds to purchase Whitmore Business School represented the convergence of personal vindication, professional mission, and social responsibility that defined how I wanted to use the wealth and influence that business success had created. The opportunity to transform an institution that had produced people who dismissed and underestimated me into something that would serve communities and individuals facing similar challenges felt like the most meaningful application of resources and energy possible. Today, as I review applications for scholarship programs that provide business education opportunities for first-generation college students from working-class backgrounds, I'm reminded that the most powerful response to those who underestimate your potential isn't anger or resentment, but the quiet confidence that comes from building something meaningful while maintaining your integrity and values. The story of being dismissed as a gold digger and ultimately owning the university that educated my critics serves as daily reminder that other people's limitations and prejudices don't determine your destiny or define your worth. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.